And welcome in. It's another episode of the Fantasy Basketball Podcast. It's Thursday, October 13th. With me as always, big game James Fraley. How are we this morning?
Ahoy, we are doing good. Week 1 preview. I'm excited. I'm kind of tired of watching people get hurt in worthless, meaningless games. So I'm just excited to bring on the real stuff.
Yeah, it's been something. More injuries this year in preseason games than I can remember. I'm actually excited to start talking about the season so I can stop watching the Portland Trail Blazers in preseason action, because that has been absolutely painful to go through.
Oh, your baby Warriors put a hurt on them.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you brought it up, yes, the baby Warriors did put a hurt on the Blazers, but I think that my high school basketball team could put a hurt on the Blazers so far this preseason. A lot of work to go on that front for sure. So we're going to have new episodes every Thursday, but we also have episodes when news breaks. So last week when we had the Draymond Green Fight Club breakout in practice, we went ahead and posted an episode. So if you want to get our thoughts on that, make sure that you check us out. And also, if you like what you hear, leave us a comment, give us a 5-star review. It really does help the show. We're bringing this to you guys, for free. So we would love to have some support out there. We started a website. That's what the kids do, James. We're pretty excited about that. So it's thefantasybasketballpodcast.com. How that URL was available is still absolutely stunning to us, but hey, we'll take it. So that's where you can find us. So check it out. We've got, we're going to be having our rankings put up there really soon here. We've got updates, links to all of our social accounts. And speaking of those social accounts, follow us on Twitter at @the_FBpod. You can also find this audio episode now on YouTube, which is cool. So we're going to be expanding our YouTube presence throughout the year. So be sure to follow and subscribe. So links to that and all of our social accounts can be found in the description there. So we are moving along, so making great progress on the show for sure. And I just want to say thanks to all the folks out there in the Twitter sphere and social media land out there supporting us. It's been really fun. We've been able to forge some really cool relationships and answer some questions and feel like we're already helping people out. So that part's been fun.
I'm actually shocked. Our demographic, when I look at the analytics, Australia, South Korea, and Spain. So to our peeps in those countries, we appreciate you very much, and I hope that we bring value to you and your fantasy leagues this season.
Yeah, I have a huge following in South Korea. Not so much in North Korea, but a huge following in South Korea for sure. So I'm a pretty big deal there, James. So you didn't know that about me, but I'm pretty big in the as I call it, the SK. Okay, so we're gonna go through some. This is cool. This is like our first preseason, like almost game time episode. So we're going to talk about news and notes for the week, talk about the injury report, which should take us, I don't know, about 4 hours, look at some team schedules, and then who and what to watch today. So let's go ahead and start out with some news and notes. Draymond Green made a public apology. He's taken a bit of a sabbatical from the team. So I know that you've been following this closely as well. So what were your thoughts just kind of on Draymond's apology, his tone? What did you get from it?
He referenced a couple things. There was conflicting reports. I don't necessarily know that I agree with it or with what he's saying, that it wasn't about contract issues. I just tend to believe that a guy who everybody, I'm using my air quotes right now, they know that Draymond's that guy, and just Draymond being Draymond. For as many years as he's been in the league and as many people who have gotten under his skin, he's never escalated anything to this level of violence. You can go back and listen to our previous episode. Ken and I, we differ on reasons and justification for any kind of acts of violence. I'm not a proponent of violence whatsoever. What I'm saying is I believe there was something that was significantly different about this situation that led to the escalation. He states that he brought personal stuff into the gym that day. So by definition, he said all the right things that were necessary for him to say. He didn't do it on his podcast. He said he wanted to be able to face the questions from the media head on because he's just that type of guy. So what I found interesting was in him saying, quote unquote, all the right things that were necessary to kind of get it to the next chapter and get to the regular season. I feel like there was some subtlety and things that he said and that he didn't say that kind of lead me to believe that not necessarily this was a hostage situation by any stretch, but um, I don't know that there's a ton of remorse for what he did. I think that there's remorse that the footage got out, and I think that it's surprising that the entire team, including Steve Kerr, are so frustrated about the footage getting out, because that's the big argument is there's more anger towards the footage getting out than the fact that Draymond actually punched Poole. That is not the wrong take to have, but I also think that that's pretty telling that, again, it goes back to, well, no one ever deserves it. But I just don't think that Jordan Poole was 100% innocent in this scenario, and I don't believe he deserved to get hit, but he probably should have poked a different bear, in my opinion. So it looks like Golden State's not they're not suspending Draymond. He took a personal sabbatical. They're going to fine him, which at this point that's been undisclosed. But he's still planning on playing in the last exhibition game, and then he will be there on ring ceremony night, which will be fun to watch, to say the least.
Yeah, it will be fun to watch. There was a report that came out this week that the guy who gave up the footage of the fight was paid $2 million by TMZ, which who knows if that's actually the case. If that is the case, that's pretty amazing. I just picture my dad when we went to Disneyland like in 1984 for the first time. It was when camcorders first came out. He had like the old leather strapped VCR, like carrying it like an Indiana Jones satchel, and he had this giant like VCR camera with the VCR tape inside of it. The thing weighed like 500 pounds. He was like lugging this thing around to make memories for us. If you see me around stadiums packing one of those things just trying to get footage, just keep on walking, because if it's worth $2 million, hey, I'm going to see what I can get too. So I don't blame him too much for taking it. But boy, it's funny because we talked about it last week. There really was a witch hunt to try to figure out who it was among that video team who leaked that footage. I can imagine he is likely unemployed, but he's rich unemployed, but he's unemployed nonetheless. Let's go ahead and go through some of these different injuries. We've talked a lot in previous episode about some of the injuries that are established, but if you are just going into drafts late and kind of getting ready for the season, you need to know about these. So just quickly, let's just go ahead and run down these really quick. So Boston, Robert Williams III, looking like 8 to 12 weeks. Danilo Gallinari, who would have been a really nice addition, I think, for that team as well. He's out for the season, was hurt in the offseason in a foreign game. That really stinks. Brooklyn, TJ Warren, out 4 to 6 weeks. Lonzo Ball, we still don't know, which is like this mystery of Lonzo Ball. Kind of to be determined. Ricky Rubio out 8 to 12 weeks in Cleveland. I think he's going to be a nice addition, when he comes back. It's going to take a while to work him into the lineup, but I think he's going to really help. Jaren Jackson Jr., 1 to 3 months for the Grizzlies. Danny Green, to be determined. Same thing for the Grizzlies. And then also Milwaukee, Joe Ingles. A lot of people forget about Joe Ingles, who's in Utah. Then he was in Portland last year, didn't play. Signed with Milwaukee in the offseason. That's kind of to be determined as well, but he's expected to play.
Well, on Joe Ingles, before we move past,
yeah,
if I'm going to give any fantasy advice, if for whatever reason he's sitting on your wire and you get into late November, I definitely pick him up around December. It's sounding like he's going to be back sometime around the first of the year. That Milwaukee team is going to be scary. When we did our analysis for the upcoming season, I just didn't even take into consideration that you got Joe Ingles. I mean, Grayson Allen, he's a very niche guy. Milwaukee's kind of insulated him. He's not well received or beloved around the league. But to get an upgrade offensively and a bigger body defensively for a team that's already very, very long, lean, and defensive-minded, like Joe Ingles is going to be sneaky for the last portion of the year, especially if they do any kind of management. So if he's sitting out there and you've got a roster spot in your injury column, I'd snag Joe Ingles for sure.
So Chet Holmgren out for the season for the Thunder, and then Markelle Fultz out 4 to 6 weeks for Orlando. So when you look at that list, James, anybody else to talk about today? I know we've talked kind of ad nauseum about most of these different players. To me, I think the most polarizing on that list is Lonzo. We just simply don't know when or if he's going to be back this season. that is just a mysterious injury, and it's a significant one too, because not only is he a very productive player when he's in the lineup, uh, but when he's out, that opens up opportunities for others. So we'll see. This is a story to track, though. I think this one is really a bit mysterious, and when the doctors don't really understand what's going on, you kind of raise an eyebrow a little bit. So that one is intriguing to me. Any others before we move forward into the new injuries that you want to talk about, James?
Yeah, Lonzo Ball's weird. I drafted Kobe White. He's going to be fighting for that starting point guard spot in Lonzo's absence. That could be that it's for 4 weeks. It could be that it's off and on through the season. That's impactful for both the Chicago Bulls, but also from a fantasy perspective, because say what you will about Lonzo, he does pepper the stat sheet across the board. He's a good rebounder for a point guard. He's going to get you a serviceable number of points, good assist guy. He doesn't turn the ball over a ton, so that's just a loss on both fantasy perspective. And you're going to have people who can sit in an injured slot and keep Lonzo and take a flyer and it doesn't hurt you. The ones that kind of hurt you are, Jaren Jackson Jr., you're going to have picked him up early. If you haven't drafted yet and you're kind of later in the season for your draft, he's definitely a value guy, but how high do you want to pick him? He's looking at 1 to 3 months, so that puts you around January. Robert Williams III, that's another one where it really depends upon how he responds to the injury. So these are guys who provide value, so you're not going to just be able to pick him up at the very end like you might be on Lonzo Ball. But how deep in the pool do you want to go? Markelle Fultz, you could say the same thing. A broken toe isn't the end of the world, but he's already in a situation where, and we're going to talk about here in a second, where you're battling for guard opportunities with Jalen Suggs and Cole Anthony. So I just don't know that I take a flyer on them unless I'm really comfortable with what I've got in the first probably 8 rounds of the draft.
Yeah, and let's just segue right into that. So Jalen Suggs injured again, and he just cannot catch a break. The thing I love about working with James is he's so very precise. So James is in charge of our show notes. And instead of just saying, hurt knee, it's a left knee capsule sprain and bone bruise. Very specific, James. You're like the fantasy doctor. I love it.
I mean, there's a lot of nuance to those capsule sprains. A standard bone bruise, if you allow it to heal and you let the inflammation go down, you're only going to aggravate it on like hyperextension or contact. Those capsule sprains, it's the tissue around it. So that could be something that's more nagging throughout the season. So in my research of this, the capsule sprain is actually worse than the bone bruise itself. So it would be doing a disservice to our fans if I left that portion out, because that could be something that is nagging throughout the season for him.
Well, it's funny because when we do this show, I can see you on video, even though others can't. I always thought that this was like a spare room in your home, but I am actually quite confident now that this is the side room at the Holiday Inn Express. I think you just simply stay at the Holiday Inn Express now, and the knowledge base that you have as Big Game James MD evolves throughout the season. This is going to be something. I mean, and that's not the only one. That's not the only one that is very specific on the notes today. So there are implications here, and Fultz is another kid. He can't really catch a break here. Broken toe, it's a significant blow. Cole Anthony is going to get the lion's share of minutes. So you put down here a couple other players, though, that I want you to talk about who you think could split some time at the backup until Suggs comes back.
Yeah, so Gary Harris, and he has, and I think it's just for the preseason, but essentially he's been kind of hit and miss on playing time with tightness. But I think he's going to get significant run. You won't have, when Cole's out, you just won't have a traditional point guard. So that's a very long team anyway. I don't anticipate them running a traditional style offense. They're just very, very long. They're going to depend upon their defense in order to set things up. Paolo Banchero is probably going to be running a lot of point forward in those scenarios. He's looked fantastic this offseason. RJ Hampton's another guy who's going to get an opportunity for a run. Unless you're playing in a very, very deep 14-plus team pool, I'd probably leave him. But Gary Harris, that's a guy I would definitely take a waiver wire on if he's sitting, especially if you're in a 10-person league for the beginning part of the season. I think from a point standpoint, good shooter, a across the board, actually. So he's not going to hurt you there. But I would look for Cole Anthony to just get massive runs. So if somebody was able to snag him in the late rounds, which that's where he was projected to go on ADP, you might have a really, really good start of the season until one of those two guys returns. I think Markelle Fultz is going to be the primary stat guy in the backcourt for Orlando when he gets back. But Cole Anthony's going to have just a green light for at least the next 3 weeks.
So, Dr. Big Game, torn ulnar collateral ligament in his left elbow. That's for Jackson Hayes. So can you explain to us what that really means for him? Looks like a 2-week injury. To me, that sounds like maybe he hit his funny bone while sleeping. I don't know what that means.
So the reason why this is concerning is this is the same ligament that has kind of sidelined Paul George. He's had multiple surgeries on the same area. So that ulnar ligament that runs in between where your ball and socket joint is on your elbow, where that becomes an issue is the way basketball is when your arms are flailing. If you get hit, so just imagine, extend your arm out, for instance, right? And it's straight. And then you get pressure on your tricep muscle, which starts to throw that hyperextension into your elbow joint. That's extremely painful, and it'll tingle all the way down. You'll lose sensation in your hand. And that is something that, like the bone bruise, it takes a significant amount of time to heal on its own. So that ulnar ligament, if it gets pinched, well, now you're talking nerve issues as well. So that's one of those things where icing, anti-inflammatory drugs, and making sure that they're really, really careful. Otherwise, it could lead to something where if he gets popped again and it hyperextends, I mean, it could lead to a surgery situation. As of right now, they don't see that in the picture, but that's a big guy. And like I said, that's been a nagging injury for Paul George for a while.
I swear, I'm learning a lot already this morning, just from Big Game James MD. So I swear, like, there's going to be a time where one of my kids goes down in high school practice and like they're shaking off their arm, and I'm just going to immediately yell out, "Oh, great, torn ulnar collateral ligament." Like, I'm just going to shout it out. How about Kristaps Porzingis and LaMelo Ball? Looks like a sprained ankle. Is it ankle? Or am I pronouncing that incorrectly, Dr. James?
That's the sprained ankle. That's how you spell
ankle. The ankle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought maybe it was an ankle. I'm learning so much from your medical science today. So yeah, sprained ankle for Porzingis, not a shock. His ankle though is probably about up to my hip. So, it might take a while to heal.
His wasn't a high grade. The reason why it's significant is we talked about this as far as Porzingis' value on the court. When he's on the court, he brings fantasy value, and he has so far when he's been on the court this preseason. So in Washington, he's going to get a ton of opportunity. There really isn't. Their front court is horrible. So this is a blow. It's not anything anybody should be shocked about. But what I'm saying is on the flip side of that pre-ankle injury, he was showing flashes again. He looks leaner, which is good for a guy who's carrying that much size. So if he can get through this, he could, like I said, I don't know that I want him on my roster, but if he's able to stay even remotely healthy, he's definitely going to bring value.
Well, and then the next one, LaMelo Ball, grade 2 sprained ankle, and looks like 2 to 4 weeks for him. These are the injuries that I love. And not that I want him to get hurt. That's not what I mean, but I love to see things like this that are considered to be short term, that you can take and use to your advantage as a fantasy owner. Because here's what's going to happen. So he's going to be out for 2 to 4 weeks. During that time, Terry Rozier is going to go absolutely ape. Okay, he's going to go nuts during this time. So if you're somebody who owns Terry Rozier, you need to be really, really on top of the LaMelo Ball news, because for me, what I would do is about a week before Ball comes back, I'm looking to ship out Rozier and get max value in return from somebody who is just not paying attention, looking at Rozier's numbers and thinking he's going to be able to sustain that value throughout the season. So to me, that's kind of a strategic move that goes along with some of this injury news. So I don't know how you kind of feel about that, James. I don't know if you look at things like that, like in that kind of a lens like I do. What are your thoughts on it?
So I'm actually I'm taking a little bit different stance on this. If you're a Terry Rozier guy, you probably got to want to hold him because here's my concern. They already are anemic in the backcourt. Gordon Hayward is already starting to kind of have the or a nagging injury bug. And this is a team that is just, I mean, you literally couldn't create a squad that is screaming for a Victor Wembanyama. This could be the ultimate, this ankle injury is just nagging. It's persistent. LaMelo is young, so it's not like you're throwing away his prime. I don't quite understand the coaching hire this offseason for Charlotte anyway. I wouldn't be shocked if this 2 to 4 weeks is something that is consistent and nagging throughout the season, and then now you have potential for LaMelo to be a shutdown candidate, around Christmas time. And if that's the case, Terry Rozier is going to be nuts the entire time. He'll probably have top 50. I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to say I'll hedge my bet and say top 20 fantasy value. And they're going to go straight to the bottom of the league and arguably have the worst record in basketball. So it wouldn't make any sense to bring it back. And where I feel bad is LaMelo's ADP, you're talking 8, 9, first round, late first round, early second round pick. That is a crushing blow if it ends up being something where they say, what is our incentive to bring him back? I just don't know that there is one. And everybody's saying you're going to see the ultimate tank fest this season, which you have said for fantasy, and it does have value for a lot of guys. It doesn't have value for a guy like LaMelo, who was first round, who may end up getting shut down early and premature. So this could be a huge story to watch moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that you and I are actually on the same page on this one. I think that fantasy managers need to just follow the news really, really closely and respond accordingly. So if it looks like they are going to bring him back, then that would be the time to start shopping Rozier. If it looks like they're not, and like James said, if they're playing extra cautious or kind of playing the long game with the draft here, which is amazing that we're talking about it on October 13th. Which, James, by the way, that is the fourth quarter of the year. We just need to respond accordingly. So the other question I have, I don't know why you're throwing Charlotte coach under the bus. Like, did you apply for that job?
No, hold on. Let me pull this up here real quick. So they were going to bring in Kenny Atkinson, and then he decided he was going to stay in Golden State. So they bring back Steve Clifford, and Steve Clifford's he is a defensive-minded coach. He's not a guy who is going to let somebody like LaMelo, who's very, I guess, I'm going to say artistic. That's not the right word, but it's best when the ball's in his hands. It's not dissimilar to how they run it in Dallas. I just don't know how that's going to work. That relationship's going to work. So had they played on the court together and they're getting their brains bashed in, because even with LaMelo on the court, they're still going to be one of the worst teams in the East. I just don't know what that dynamic looks like. So it could be a combination of things to where Steve Clifford is a stopgap until we bring our next coach in. We get down, we get a first, second, or third pick in the draft, and then we just kind of do our rebuild. And it all starts with LaMelo kind of sitting this one out. So I don't know. There's just more to this story. Ken's right. Just be mindful. If somebody isn't giving value to Terry Rozier and you can get him on the cheap, just throw it out there. The worst they can say is no. I wouldn't give a top guy for him necessarily, but I think at the end of the season, if it's just him and Gordon Hayward's not doing anything, I mean, Rozier's gonna be a beast.
So my guess is you probably did apply for the job, but you applied for the job on September 31st. And if none of this makes sense to you guys out there, you need to go back and listen to some previous episodes.
The hidden day.
Yes, the hidden day where James gets everything done, including applying for NBA basketball jobs. Now, I mentioned earlier that, and I see James is shaking his head right now. I mentioned earlier that we can see each other as we do the show. And as James is sitting here in the Holiday Inn Express, he's wearing an old school Sacramento Kings Marvin Bagley jersey along with a Kings hat. So just picture big game in that. And it's a sad day because his ride or die for the year, Marvin Bagley, bone bruise and sprained MCL. So I mean, it's October 13th, and it's already not working out for Bags. So thoughts on that, James?
Yeah, I took Marvin in my fantasy draft. I actually took him in another fantasy draft as well. The good news is his starting spot, regardless of when he comes back, I mean, he walks right into it. So I know I get that back, but you're talking 3 to 4 weeks minimum. A sprained MCL, it really comes down to your diligence on your rehab and how you respond to physical therapy. So I'm praying. I don't know much about the medical team or the physicians there in Detroit. As high as my acumen is in the medical field, I'm just not privy to what they're practicing over in Detroit at the moment. But from a fantasy perspective, I mean, Nerlens Noel, he just has a knack for filling these roles and filling them really, really well. So strong field goal percentages, rebounds, going to get you block shots. I also think you're going to see extended run for Jalen Duren. We talked about this. I watched 2 of their preseason games so far. I absolutely don't see any of this Jaden Ivey Rookie of the Year talk. It just won't happen. He's got to be a defensive menace. I do like that. I think Cade looks so far to be kind of forcing the issue on some things for Detroit. I think they are not looking to race to the bottom. They want to get into the play-in game in the Eastern Conference. So there will be incentive for these guys to play hard. But yeah, Marvin Bagley, 3 to 4 weeks. That sucks. I'm not going to drop him. I put him on my IL. There just wasn't any value in a 14-team league. There wasn't any reason to drop him. But that was just a crushing blow to me because I knew you were going to say something the minute he got hurt. But I'm still, if I'm the only person with stock and he hits even for 1 month, I'm going to cash in.
Well, and I think that going forward, at some point, you are going to land an NBA head coaching gig. And if it hasn't worked out for Bagley by then, I have a feeling he's going to be on your staff. So, I think that there is just this feeling of admiration that you have for him. And honestly, I feel bad for Bagley because things just have not gone his way. He was stuck in a log jam in Sacramento, and unfortunately, he's just going to be known as the guy the Kings took instead of Luka or Trey, and that's not really fair to him. But it happens, in drafts quite a bit. So let's go ahead and move forward. We've got some schedule notes, pretty exciting. There aren't any teams coming up that have 4 games in the week, so there really aren't any, sneaky waiver pickups on that front. There are some teams that have 2 games during the week. That's going to be Brooklyn, Dallas, Milwaukee, and New York. So if you're looking for some into-the-roster filler players for the week, those would be teams to stay away from. Anything else on the schedule that you have noted, just in terms of number of games?
Well, not from number of games. I'm talking quality of games. I just want to read you Minnesota's opening schedule. So they have 3 games in the first week. So they play Oklahoma City, Utah, Oklahoma City, and then next week they play San Antonio. Where we go? San Antonio twice. Then they play the Lakers, and then they play San Antonio again. So let me repeat. In the first 2 weeks of the season, they're going to play arguably the worst team in the league 3 times, one of the bottom 5 worst teams in the league twice, and then another one once. And then you play the Lakers, who, by all accounts, and I didn't have this on the show notes, but this just isn't looking good. Last night, Pat Bev calls a huddle, and everybody attends the huddle except for Russell Westbrook. So I don't know how the Minnesota Timberwolves got this schedule. I haven't gone deep into what it looks like at the end of the year, but if you're not picking Minnesota guys off the wire to just go nuts, I don't know. Look for all of them. Gobert, Towns, Anthony Edwards specifically to just carry you weeks 1 and 2.
Isn't it fun though? I mean, it's just so fun.
I'm glad we're here.
Yeah, I am too. But I'm just, in terms of the Lakers, I know that ESPN this week came out with their top 20 teams to watch on League Pass. I think they went through the entire league. I think Portland was actually 45th, even though there aren't that many teams in the league. But they were going through, and how can you not have Brooklyn and the Lakers like in the top 2? Just because it could be fantastic to watch from a quality of basketball standpoint, or it could be an absolute train wreck. And I remember years ago, I was coming back from Seattle. We live here in the Northwest, and I was in a traffic jam for like 2 hours, and I thought, wow, this coming up could be the most horrific traffic accident I've ever seen in my life. And instead, once I got there, it was just people stopping to look at a deer that had been hit by a car and was going into rigor mortis. So like one leg was like straight up. That's kind of how the Nets and Lakers are. They're like that deer on the side of the road that even though you don't want to stop, you don't want to look at it, you just almost have to because you just do not know what is going to happen. And we're not even in the regular season yet. So I think, yeah, I'm going to have to make some type of a rigor mortis deer image and put somebody's head on it. I mean, this is going to be something to watch for sure.
Did you see the Nets promotional video where Ben Simmons just casually goes to shoot from like 5 feet away, and he has the most awkward wrist roll, and you're seeing the camera angle is a clear shot dead on to his wrist. So we both coach. So when you're breaking down a shooter's jump shot, one of the things that we tend to do oftentimes if we're trying to explain, whether it's an imbalance on how you're jumping with the left and right foot or the flick of your wrist up at the top. Anyway, you get a clear shot of Ben. He airballs the living piss out of this shot in this promo video, but his wrist does I couldn't recreate this wrap. If you haven't found it, we'll post it on Twitter, but it is crazy to me. And I thought, if this isn't the precipice of a season of just shenanigans and skullduggery and malarkey and all of those fun things that end with an EY, I cannot wait to watch this all season long on NBA League Pass. I'm excited.
Yeah, so I assume it was a joke promo video that somebody put together.
No, it wasn't a joke promo video.
The Nets put it together and showed him airballing a shot?
It wasn't the Nets per se. It was them kind of showing their unity in the group, and they're all just kind of having fun. I'll have to pull it up and send it to you. It's absolutely unreal. But at the end of it, it's kind of the throwaway at the end. Ben Simmons just turns around and he shoots it from like 5 feet away, airballs it so bad. But when you replay it after you watch it the first time, you're like, wait a minute, he just airballed that? And then you look at what his wrist does at the top of that shot. Oh my God! It's good thing they don't need him to score at Brooklyn, because it was embarrassing.
Yeah, we'll post it on. Yeah, we'll find it. We'll post it on our Twitter account. I did see that Simmons came out today. He was upset because he was at a camp for kids and he was taking some jump shots and he airballed one and somebody got it on film and it's all over the place. So he was talking today about how he found a lot of comfort in going to Kyrie Irving to talk about how to deal with social media and the community in general. That to me is fascinating and so much fun, because I want to go turn on League Pass and see like Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons in the locker room having some type of spiritual ritual, like roasting sage and just doing some really crazy stuff. I'm stoked for it. I'm ready to go. So other things that we're looking for during the week. I know we talked about ring ceremony a little bit. Are they going to have Draymond Green and Jordan Poole stand next to each other? I mean, what is that going to look like in Golden State? That's going to be interesting for sure. You had some other players to watch on here as well. So what are some things that you've got your eye on?
So we talked earlier, Oklahoma City, Utah, and Oklahoma City are the first 3 games that the Timberwolves have. I think Anthony Edwards, this is his coming out party. I think that he is going to be the leader of the squad moving forward. He's an absolute fan favorite. The league is going to really push to kind of get him out there as much as possible. And I think this is coming out party starts week 1, and then it'll be followed shortly by week 2. So definitely don't forget to start him. That's another thing we left off of our do's and don'ts for the upcoming season. Manage whatever outfit you're using, whether you're using Yahoo, Fantrax, ESPN. Anytime you pick a guy off the waiver wire, understand that it completely resets your roster setting for the week. So if on Sunday, for instance, you set your roster for the full next week, And then on Monday, you pick a guy off the waiver wire. When you pick that guy off the waiver wire and it says, do you want to put him in your starting lineup? And you do that, understand that it completely throws off the rest of your week on your starters. So if you don't go back through each one of those days and validate that you haven't started, you will have top tier guys that aren't on your roster. So if you're lazy, you will get hosed. Do not be that guy who leaves Anthony Edwards on the bench because you forgot to set your roster, because he's going to go nuts. We've got Phoenix on the 19th, Dallas versus Phoenix. Luka handed those boys a butt whooping the last time they saw each other. I think Luka is my pick for MVP. I think we talked about it, so look for him to have a strong night on the 19th. Nikola Jokic gets Utah and Oklahoma City. So in week 1, he's got his entire team back. Everybody's healthy. He more or less took, I don't even want to say a bunch of misfits, because it always seems like I'm degrading NBA talent. What I'm saying is the talent level this season versus what he's had the last 2 seasons as MVP. The Denver Nuggets are going to be scary in the West. Utah and Oklahoma City, that's the 19th and 22nd. You got Devin Booker versus Portland. From everything that I've seen, and me and Ken are both lifelong Blazer fans, they play absolutely no defense. So I wouldn't be shocked if Booker puts up 45 in this game. That's on the 21st. You got Joel Embiid going to San Antonio on the 22nd. It's the battle of the, it's not quite Shaq versus Patrick Ewing, but you got Jakob Poeltl versus Joel Embiid. I'm going to lean Joel Embiid to come out on top of that. I don't know, you might see something different there, but he should have a big game on the 22nd. Then lastly, I've got LeBron versus Portland on the 23rd. Again, I've talked about this multiple times. The Lakers are not in cruise mode. They haven't made the playoffs. They can't afford not to make the playoffs. I think they're going to look to put a stamp on any of these games that are winnable games. I think they're going to look to blow them out just to get momentum. So the 23rd, look for LeBron to have a big game.
Well, yeah, it's just exciting to finally be there. So if you're having a draft late, make sure you go back and listen to previous episodes that we have out there at the FBP Pod, on Twitter. Check us out. Go to the website, thefantasybasketballpodcast.com. You can find the episodes there as well, just to go back and catch up. It's funny you said that he was adding a bunch of misfits. I always think of like the Island of Misfit Toys whenever somebody says misfits. So I think Luka Doncic could be the MVP this year, even with like a Jack in the Box and like a running Etch-a-Sketch and some of these other like misfit toys out there. He's just that good for sure. So it's exciting time for us for sure on the podcast. Looking forward to the season. I think it's going to be a great one. We talk a lot about these players wanting to go out with these FU seasons. Well, it starts now. They're going to go out and likely try to make a very quick statement this year. So certainly going to be fun to watch. So parting shots, James, before we take off.
Yeah, I think like you said, you're going to have people who have a chip on their shoulder and things to prove. I think Milwaukee has something to prove. They felt like they should have been playing for the finals championship last year. Their team is back. Again, keep an eye on Joe Ingles later in the season. That squad is a defensive-minded team, and I see them coming out of the East for sure. And then the second thing you need to watch for, from a fantasy perspective, and Ken had said this, it could be more fun because you could see some guys on the waiver wire putting up stats that you're not used to seeing. But the race to the bottom for Scoot Henderson and Wembanyama is going to be crazy. And the thing is we're kind of overemphasizing those two guys, but this draft class, 1 through 9, and we'll talk more about that as we get deeper into the season, but this is something where if you're a lottery team and you don't get one of those two guys, that doesn't mean you're not going to get a game changer moving forward. And you've got 6 teams now that really don't have any viability in the Western or Eastern Conference. So it's going to be who can play horrible and what does that do to your culture by kind of instilling this kind of reason to lose and some of the trickery that you're going to find on how people, what the narrative looks like. Oh, we're not tanking, and this is strategy, and we're getting some of our younger players minutes. So it'll be fun. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities. Be conscious of the waiver wire. I'm excited to bring you everything, the news and notes throughout the week. Make sure you are following us on Twitter. We make sure to update as injuries happen on our fantasy injury report. And the YouTube thing's going to be huge for us moving forward because we've talked about this, but our long-term goal is to transition what we're doing right now from just an audio format into a visual format to where we can kind of interact and just it provides a little bit more for our following. Where we're going to kick that off is YouTube Shorts. Right now, you can get the audio episodes on YouTube. You can find us on the Fantasy Basketball Podcast. The link will be in the description. But what the intent will be is every day when you wake up, YouTube Short, we're going to have what the schedule is for the day, key injuries, key players to watch for, and that'll be delivered for you each and every day. So make sure you keep an eye on that for the season. But I'm just excited that it's finally here.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if you're going to be able to do that right from the Continental Breakfast there at the Holiday Inn Express where you're staying.
Cancel
or
my
if we
surgeries.
could just, right, exactly. So maybe you can secure one of the conference rooms there as well. So for Big Game James, the fantasy doctor from the day, I'm Ken Kelly. So thanks for stopping by. This was the Fantasy Basketball Podcast.